Welcome to the show, Gillian Brockell, formerly the Washington Post, now an independent journalist, covering ICE flights. You're the person to go to for that. And
Trying to
yet
be.
somehow not at an institution, which we will dive into. We have a question we open with, and feel free to answer it whatever degree of specificity is comfortable for you. When's the last time you worried about making your monthly expenses?
Yeah, it's been about 6 years, and I say that with the caveat that I'm currently worried about monthly expenses in a couple of months, but not
Got
this
some
month.
runway.
My family and I, we're living right now on my spouse's income and savings. And so if I don't start making more money soon, you know, that will become an issue this year. But 6 years ago, I mean, the thing that made the difference was the pandemic. And they, one of the first things they did, if I recall correctly, was suspended student loan payments. And that's what, I don't know, really enabled me to, I was making good money at the Post, but my payments were so high that it was, it wasn't enough to save with or really like cut away at my other debts. And then I didn't have to pay student loans for 2 years. And suddenly I had the down payment for a house and I, was able to pay off my credit cards finally. And, that's what made the difference.
It was kind of UBI actually
Yeah.
when they cut the student loan
Yeah.
debt because it
And I
freed up
will,
so much money in the economy.
and I had the privilege of not losing my job during the pandemic, I should say. My job was stable, but I didn't have to.
So I think Mike and I have a top question also. There's the coming in hot question, and then there's the coming in like we've turned it down from 10 to maybe 8. Still hot.
Okay, cool.
But you're the first person we've had on that is a veteran of the mass extinction event
Yeah.
at the Washington Post.
Yeah.
I personally got teary that day.
Yeah. I mean, which day?
Both days. There's the 2 rounds.
I was in the
two
first
rounds.
buyout at the end of 2023. And then there were some small layoffs a couple months before that. That was the sort of canary in the coal mine. There were some layoffs after that. There was another buyout. And then there was the mass layoff a couple months ago. Yeah.
It is a topic that comes up a lot when we speak to journalists because so many of the journalists we've spoken to have been employed by big institutions and we're all seeing the direction things are going. So as much as you want to go into it, like what has been your experience and how does it feel to, watch this very important institution go through all these changes?
Yeah. Let me see. When they offered the first buyout, I mean, it was really sudden. All of the sudden they said, we're 70 million in the hole and we got to do these buyouts, which is, it's all bullshit. I'll go into why Bezos is a billionaire and he sucks and why that's all bullshit anyway. I'll go into that as much as you want me to later. My personal experience was that, we suddenly heard that we weren't profitable for the first time in years, that it was a huge debt or, huge loss, and that they had to do these buyouts to make up for it. And the way that they did the buyouts were really insulting because they didn't offer it to everybody. They offered it to certain departments. And then the sort of, they'd offer it to the 10 people on the climate desk. Like I'm just making those numbers up. And then they said, and all right, we're going to offer it to all 10 of the people on the climate desk and we need 6 people to take it, and then it was like, if you don't take it, your job may not be stable. they actually didn't offer it to me and my section. At that point, I had been wanting to write a book, and like, I'm not a person who can like wake up in the morning and work on my book before going to my other job. Like, I can't do that. Just wasn't going to work for me. So I really wanted to write this book. And so I was like, I asked for the buyout. I hoped it would save someone else's job in local. Like, it was a little weird, even though I wrote about history and I had like a national purview. I was in the local section basically because of the editor who started it. And so local was going to get, slashed. And I thought, I'll take this pile of money, I'll go write a book. And then since my section was like, since my section was one of the more successful sections, like, I'll probably just get my job back, And so when I left, I was thinking like, be right back, see you guys in 2 years. At the same time, you've seen it. We've seen that happen at other places where this is the first round, right? Of like, when do these big layoffs or buyouts actually solve the problem? And then like, now we're great. I can't think of an example where that's happened. And I remember my spouse saying at the time, like, the next round of layoffs or buyouts, like, they might not be as generous because they were offering a pretty big amount of money. And I will say that's not Bezos's just generosity. That money came from the Washington Post pension fund that he had suspended as soon as he bought the place. And that was overfunded by more than $1 billion. And he couldn't use that money. It wasn't his money. He couldn't touch it. He could use it for pensions or buyouts. And so that money didn't come from Bezos, but it was a good amount of money. And so I took it, and within a couple of months, the other buyout people and I, were sort of like hearing things of, oh God, the new editor is blah, blah, blah. Oh God, they're getting rid of da, da, da. And, I think the sort of like captured nature of the institution sort of like burst into view right before the election, like 10 months later, when Bezos canceled the Kamala Harris endorsement. Yeah. That's when it was like, I think that's when it became like public knowledge. But we were hearing these things, months beforehand. And just, I think a lot of us felt really rejected when we took the buyout, even though it was optional for me. I think other people felt very rejected. And then within a couple of months, it was like, oh no, we're the lucky ones. Yeah. Yeah. And then I had been struggling for like a couple of years at that point with the whole sort of bullshit nature of like objective, neutral journalism, as if such a thing can exist. I never really believed in that, but I was willing to like play ball for like a good job and establishing a reputation. But I always thought like the goal is to become a respected enough journalist that I can now express my opinions, And so when I left, I was also thinking like, maybe I'll dabble in having some opinions in public, and I came to enjoy that. But I freelanced a couple stories for the Post over the next, up until August. The layoff kicked in January 1st of 2024. And so I freelanced a couple stories for them. So I was still kind of captured. Like, I wouldn't really let myself be myself completely. And then that August and September, I freelanced what I felt was a pretty big story for them. I wrote about history before I did ice flights. So I wrote about history, and I had this, a source gave me some documents about the murder of Emmett Till and the way it was covered by the journalist at the time who did this sort of, he did this really groundbreaking interview with the killers after the killers were found not guilty. He did the story where they, confessed to it. But they had their own, oh, he was flirting with my wife and all this, bullshit. And what these documents proved was that the journalist was in a business deal with the killers.
What?
He wanted to make a movie and a book, and he promised them a percentage if they would talk to him. And so it behooved him to make the killers look like they had good reason or any reason for doing what they did, and because that affected his bottom line. And it was clear in the documents that I got that he knew that what they were telling him wasn't true.
Yeah.
And I felt it was a really big story, and I went to them with it. I filed like a 5,000 word story. And I'm not an overwriter. That's, the shortest I could make it. And over the next month, with the editor, who was a lovely person, she kept coming back and being like, the new senior editors want more edits. They want to change it to this. They want to change it to that. And this is like 8 or 9 rounds, cutting this part out, and everything that they were cutting out was the stuff that was damning to the journalist, who was a bad journalist, and it was clear that she didn't really understand what was wrong with the story, why she had to come back and do another round of edits, to the point where I was like, look, if you change this word, I'm taking the story back and I'm going to take it somewhere else.
Right. As a freelancer, you had.
Yeah, I had that power, which I wouldn't had if I had been working there.
And can you speak to some of the specific edits as a fellow journalist? I'm curious about.
I would,
if I remembered that they were trying to.
If I remembered what the specific things were, I would tell you. But what became clear over this month was that they were trying to make the journalists seem less bad. And I was like, why are you sticking up for him? He didn't work for the Post. He didn't.
Is he even still alive?
No. No. And the documents are like it's incontrovertible. Yeah. So eventually they didn't change that word. That was my last straw. I'm happy with what was published. It could have been better, but at least wasn't watered down, I think. But after that, I was like, okay, I'm never going back to the Post. Okay. And it was like, a couple months later that Trump won again. And I was just like, I felt unleashed of just I'm going to say what I think from now on, and I'm never going to work for another billionaire. I'm never, it's too much compromise for me. Everybody has to make their own decisions about how to make a living, right? In journalism and in any creative economy. But I was just like, I'm never doing that again.
As somebody outside of you all's profession, all of this just brings so many things to question for me. You're talking about a culture change inside this institution.
Yeah.
That obviously has huge cultural ramifications. And so, as much as the nuts and bolts of it are interesting enough.
Yeah.
From your perspective, it's like, So it sounds as if, right? Okay, new owner means he's trying to push the content in a different direction.
Can
I mean, and that's but I'm just curious how the machinations of it work, and whether or not that's what's happening.
I want to jump in real quick because I think this is an important context, which is Bezos didn't start out this way. That's what's so fascinating about the
Thank you for understanding that.
Because he started out with democracy dies in darkness bullshit, which I've never liked as a slogan.
And that's always been the Post motto, though, right? Is that
no? That was a Bezos line
associated.
That he brought in. That he brought in 2017, and
that's the level of betrayal, and that's I think the Post has an amazing history of both standing up to power and sucking up to power. There's like.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Like a lot of institutions, there's access journalism involved, and I think I could make a defense for some kinds of access journalism.
Sure.
Like in order to get close to a source, sometimes you do have to massage the direction that you're planning on taking the piece. Like I think it's good to be as open as possible, but I like what I always say is I'm going to be honest. I'm going to represent you as you represent yourself to me. Right. And then let them. That's how I would have handled that situation, I think.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it has an amazing reputation historically. And then with Trump, they actually went harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
In which direction?
Towards democracy dies. That's when they came up with
towards
the democracy dies in darkness.
Good journalism, towards, reporting facts instead of reporting objectivity. I got hired there in June of 2013, and so he bought it a couple months later, and it was a surprise.
Bezos bought it a couple
months later, and it was a surprise, and people were scared then. Because the Amazon, is there going to be compromises, and he had vowed to Don Graham, the former owner, and to the newsroom that he wasn't going to do anything in the newsroom, that we just needed to keep doing what we were doing, and he was going to provide us runway, right? Which was incredible investment. We grew immensely. We were doing.
As a quick question, was it profitable at that point?
It wasn't profitable when he bought it, and within a couple of years with this runway, we were, and we stayed profitable for most of the time that he owned it, and he did seem to keep to his word. He stayed out of our reporting and out of what he's doing, out of what we were doing. And he just sort of provided investment. At the same time, our union negotiations were horrible. I mean, he just would not give on anything. And, we wanted like 1% 401k matching, which I had a better matching when I was a flight attendant for an airline, and, he was just so antagonistic with the union. So I didn't have any, idea that and he would also say this isn't charity. I'm expecting the place to be profitable. And we'd be like, okay, but also why isn't it charity? You can afford it. Why not just lose 100 million every year, doing a service supposedly to democracy?
Pocket change.
Yeah.
The interest on one investment. We could do the math, but this is his wedding, I think, cost more than that. It could have been the kind of thing that a rich person does to sustain their legacy and to just
I think
put something out in the world.
And I think sorry. I'm so sorry.
I think we both feel very passionately.
Yeah. I think he started out that way of thinking, well, it makes me look really good to own this institution. And then I think he changed his mind. I think after a couple rounds of union negotiations and, all of the controversy the previous year with our publisher, Fred Ryan, who he built a little golden parachute. And then I think with the failure of the ARC project, which was his little baby that didn't work out at all, and lost hundreds of millions of dollars, I think he was just annoyed with these whiny employees of his who he paid more than the employees at his other companies. And I think he just got sick of us. And then I think as the closer it got to the election, the more he saw that I'm going to benefit if one person wins, and I'm not going to benefit if another person wins, and put his thumb on the scale. And it's been a steep downhill.
Let's talk about some of the specifics in case people don't realize. So there was the first round of layoffs, which I think were very upsetting to people, but I just got teary. I didn't cry. Then there were some changes, including the backing out of the endorsement, any endorsement.
Any endorsement at all.
So do you think you have can put together kind of a rough timeline of what happened before what the mass extinction event that happened? Was it this year? I don't know.
It was last year. Was it
last year? Late last year.
Yeah.
And so people can kind of see where it hit a cliff.
Yeah. So, we were profitable every year for years. And then all of a sudden there was this $77 million deficit. And this became apparent a couple months after our publisher, Fred Ryan, had left, and under, pressure to leave. He had lost the confidence of the newsroom. And Bezos brought in one of his friends, Patty Stonecipher, to be the interim publisher and CEO until we got a new one. And her first meeting with the newsroom, she was wonderful. She was like, "I'm sorry for everything you've been through, and we're going to restore order, and we believe in democracy." And then she came back a couple months later and said, "There's a huge deficit and we have to do buyouts." And when we were asking, why is there a deficit? What happened? Where did the money come from? She sort of allude to, well, now that we're in the calmer Biden years, a lot of people have stopped subscribing to news because they were overwhelmed, and now they feel like they can chill. And we're like, yeah, but how much of a portion of the 77 million is that? And it was 10%. I was like, okay, so what about the other 99%? And she would just say, well, I don't want to dwell on the past. Let's move forward.
Rough.
And to say that to a room, first of all, I cover history. So we absolutely need to dwell on the past. What are you talking about? And then to say that to a room of investigative reporters, and then so people were saying, well, how can we know if we're moving in the right direction if we don't know what the wrong direction was? How can we know what went wrong? And to this day, there has never been any reporting that I've seen or an investigation or anything on where did the $70 million deficit come from. Now, I have a theory, but it's just a theory. There was this thing called ARC, this project that was essentially building a CMS suite that for our newsroom and then for other newsrooms to buy. And they spent a ton of money on it. And it was better than the CMS we had been using, which was
What's
very
CMS?
old.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about what a CMS is. Just for a second.
Okay. So the content management system, just like the platform that you're uploading stuff to, what you're writing your article in, how you're loading your video. Yeah, like WordPress. It was a customized WordPress for media outlets. And the idea was that we were going to have this alternative revenue stream of this of ARC, of leasing ARC, selling ARC.
So
And
it was almost like he was trying to reproduce what he did with Amazon Web Services, where all these other
yeah,
companies use their servers.
that's
Not necessarily the
that's
servers, although that is an interesting question about whether or not that would have been served off of Amazon Web Services.
yeah, I have no
But
idea.
it's like selling WordPress licenses. I mean, WordPress
Yeah,
really it's incredibly complicated WordPress.
yeah, super duper complicated specific WordPress. And I think that like any journalist could have told you, like, are there that many journalism outlets that even exist
Right.
to make a profit on that? And of course they didn't. It was a huge failure. And that's where I think it came from. And that was Bezos's idea. And I think it pissed him off that it didn't work. And I think he decided to blame it on some other people.
And
That's
at the
my
same
theory. That is
time,
speculation.
and at the same time, I think I've talked about this prior to Trump's election. The culture was already experiencing a little bit of a swing back
Yeah,
from the racial and social justice reckoning that had happened
right,
with George Floyd,
right.
where all kinds of newsrooms really, I think, sincerely
Yeah,
dug in and went out to try and repair some representation
yeah,
in the newsroom,
yeah.
repair historical oversights.
It was a huge part of my work.
And then, towards the end of Biden, I don't think there was a reason for this. Like my reporting, when I reported my big story for the Drift Right of Hollywood, what people told me over and over was there wasn't like a single thing that happened that was like, we're going to reconsider our take on racial justice, reconciliation. It was more just like all these white guys who are still basically in charge got tired of the work.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's frustrating about what happened at the Post is there wasn't a reaction to anything. It was just, oh, you know what? Like maybe the way we did things before was okay. And then I think there was a recognition that if we don't have to do this, we don't want to do this. And why not embrace what feels like an inevitable change and just line pockets? And then you get the pulling of the Kamala endorsement, which I think again was another piece of drift, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I
it
think
wasn't like embrace of Trump just yet. It was it was like, well, you know what? Like, let's just pull that back.
Yeah. I think that's
not endorse anyone.
I think that's when it became public that was happening. I think it was already happening. A huge part of my work, I wrote this section called Rotropolis, and it was the past rediscovered. And so a huge part of my work was, racial justice work, was writing about the real history of slavery, of the civil rights movement, of the Civil War. And when I started the job, I said to my editor, I'm not both siding the Civil War, and I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't about slavery. And she was like, 100%, we are never going to ask you to do that. I was like, great. And when I left, like I said, they didn't offer the buyout to me. And when I left, I assumed that they would fill my role, and they didn't.
Wow.
I don't want to stick to the past entirely.
I do.
I do have more questions, but what about you? Do you
just
at the Post?
Well, there's one more, and it sort of gets at what I was asking about earlier too. But in this instance, and we're sort of describing this slow drift from democracy dies in darkness to seeming Trump support. But I'm really curious when it comes to the Emmett Till story that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
and
this is my first time talking about this publicly.
But when it comes to the sort of direct meddling that seemed to be happening in the editorial of that story, is that do you feel like that's evidence of a drift? Do you feel like that's something more intentional? And is this are these editorial changes made by new people that are being brought in, or are these long-standing editors that feel like, okay, we have to push things in this new direction?
I think it was new editors. I know that the main criticism of it was coming from a new editor. I'm not going to name who it was. The editor that I was working with was a longtime Post employee. I had never worked with her, but she'd been there a long time and she was lovely. And you could tell that she was really confused too, because she thought the story was great. And she didn't even really know what to ask me for. She's like, I guess it's like supposed to be like, she was trying to interpret what was supposed to be changed too. And I don't know for certain that it was rightward drift, that it was, oh, we don't care about racial justice anymore, or what. It seemed to me that the edits were to leave open room for interpretation on the badness of this journalist. It seemed like it was about protecting journalism. And I was like, why? It's not about you. It's about this specific horrible man, who did a bad thing that had lasting consequences, because most people in the South still believe that narrative of what happened the night he was murdered. And we know it's not true. And we know that the journalist who published it knew it was not true. And yeah, it seemed like they were trying to defend like objective, neutral journalism. And I was like, that's not what it's about, though.
I wanted to say something about this when you mentioned the truth versus objectivity. That makes intuitive sense to me.
Right.
But I imagine there are some people listening that may be like, but wait a minute, I thought objectivity was truth. And I don't mean to make that's, I'm not making fun.
No. Like, this is like new. Yeah. This is, the sort of shorthand, I think, in journalism is, if it's raining outside or if one person says it's raining outside and another person says it isn't, your job isn't to quote the two people. Your job is to go outside and see if it's raining, right? That's the truth versus objectivity. And if you're being objective, you're going to go, this person says it's raining. That person says it's not. Who can say, And if you're reporting the truth, then you're going to say, this person said it was the truth. This person erroneously said it was not. It is not raining.
And I think you're being
generous. Yes, I am.
Towards the people at the Post that might still be there. And there are still good people there. I want to say I still subscribe. I unsubscribed over the endorsement and then resubscribed because they are the ones who broke the targeting of the Venezuelan boats. Like, they're the ones who broke that there were survivors and that there was a double tap, drone strike, that survivors were targeted in the aftermath of the initial strike. And the Post can still do amazing reporting, and the kind of reporting that only institutions can do. It isn't going to be replaced by newsletters and even smaller outlets.
100%.
At the same time,
their
op-ed page has been a structural thing is they've embraced AI, which is
well, and here's
incredible.
The funny thing is that they used to say who was on the editorial board. It was in a little side box next to every single editorial. And I was a video editor before I was a staff writer. And for about 2 years, I worked in the opinions section. So I didn't express opinions, but I taped other people expressing opinions, right? So I have a somewhat inside view. And so whenever people would say like, the editorial board's too opaque, blah, 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 they'd be like, what are you talking about? There's a little box right next to every editorial saying who's on the board and like what kind of subjects they cover. So you can know who wrote it. And it's like, well, then why not just put their name on it? Like if Jonathan Capehart wrote that one, why doesn't Jonathan Capehart just put his name on it, you know? And so that was, you know, one of the sort of like ongoing debates when I worked there. And then last August, after, you know, a ton of people had left, they took the little box away. It doesn't say who's on the editorial board now. And if you ask the little AI, ask the post AI who's on the editorial board, and they'll give you a list of a bunch of people who have left. And I'm telling y'all, it's Megan McArdle. Like all those insane editorials. Like I read the woman's writing many times. I was there when she was hired. It's her. Like again, I don't know for a fact. This is my guess. It's yeah. And like
all the pro free market bullshit.
Yes. Yeah. And
like
just
all the pro AI bullshit. She actually did a column about using AI. And like, as I'm not an AI abolitionist personally, I've been pretty open about like, I do find some utility in it, even in supporting some of the stuff that I do that's related to writing, mainly like transcripts, summarizing.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Going through big stuff. But she's like embraced. And also now that you're saying that, all like snaps into place. Yeah. Like, you're right. It is Megan. She's Megan also McArdle. A terrible writer.
Well, yeah, she's a terrible writer. She has never, she's never met us. Like she's never fully supported a fact ever in her life. Like like a position she's taking. She's never done it. It's just like they're just sort of like gestures at evidence where you're like, where are you getting that? You know,
one of her more famous columns was she defended what was the fire?
The Grenfell fire in London that killed like 80 people.
She defended the owners of the building and made some kind of case that like installing fire alarms like would impinge on people's freedom, or like it would have cost something and that cost would have been passed on. It was like the most free market brain you've ever seen, and that's real standard for her. And then I think probably some of the other stuff is harder to pinpoint where we probably will not know for sure. In the news.
I mean, it has been reported that the new opinions editor, I forget his name, is quite taken with Megan and is sort of building the entire department around her, like getting her like a podcast or whatever. I don't know. So yeah, that's my theory.
But as far as the newswell goes, like, I mean, my theory is we're not going to necessarily know what has happened there because I imagine it's a lot of stuff that's just not getting reported. Yeah.
I mean, without getting into specifics, I just hear things every once in a while that are just like, it's really bad. It's really, really bad. And you're right that there are still really good people who work there and they are still doing good journalism. And I think that they either don't understand or can't leave because the industry is so bad. Or they just don't understand how just destroyed the reputation is, and that the quality, everything that they report, even the really, really good stuff, is all questionable to the general public now because of everything that has happened. And I think that a lot of the people who are still there, you know, the industry is really bad. There are no jobs. And I think the people that could leave have left.
I think we should get Gillian back on like soon, because I would love to talk more about, like, a lot more about what she's doing now too. But this conversation just seems so important to me, and it seems like something that we've sort of built up to over the course of the time we've been doing this show, is getting at sort of the bigger implications of the institutional changes of a place like Washington Post. And I like, one thing that's become very apparent to me through conversations we're having with journalists, through doing this podcast with journalists, that I've never spent this much time with journalists, so I'm really understanding what the job is more than ever. And then I'm seeing big news stories and stuff that are happening in the world right now, where what's becoming really clear to me, and this is new to me being outside of it, is that journalism, like, by its definition, it takes so much more work than people could ever understand. The amount of work that, like, real journalism takes, and having sources and reporting, and the standards that go into all of it, and having it is so important. But it's just become so clear that because there's this disconnect between civilians and journalists in terms of what the job entails, people don't understand the cost of it. They don't understand what goes into it. So I feel like as a society, we're valuing it at an all-time low,
right,
when we actually need it the most, because the people in power are always fucking with the facts constantly now. And so, like, I find this conversation, and you two specifically, to just be so it's so interesting to hear your perspectives on all of this, because it is just seems like we're really at a moment as a country on if we're going to value journalism or not.
Yeah, I think I agree with that 100%. From being in, from a journalist perspective, I think that I really had to think a lot about the way that this sort of objectivity myth has not created this moment, but contributed to the moment that's been going on it's been building up for decades. How, insane, batshit, baseless, conservative stuff will make it into an objective news report just because it's like easy to talk to a guy at a think tank, right? Versus an underpaid nonprofit social worker at a, some left-wing place, and they're bristly and they don't understand why you don't get it, and they're hard to talk to because they're overwhelmed. Just the way that I think journalism has been manipulated just by, being like pleasant and friendly, I think is like way underestimated.
And I'll go one further.
Yeah.
Which is, there's another problem when you're just quoting think tank folks. I think the most expensive kind of journalism to do is to get out on the fucking floor.
Right.
Is to go do shoe leather stuff, which doesn't have to mean like reporting for 100 hours. It doesn't mean Sinclair Lewis, it doesn't mean Studs Terkel, to name, it doesn't mean necessarily working on the stockyard floor and reporting back on the lives of people there.
Right.
It can just mean, like, for me, as someone who's primarily an opinion journalist, like reading some fucking studies myself, like going someplace and observing what's happening, and then trying to like let that inform what I'm doing. And there's like, so again, I'm primarily an opinion journalist, although I do think of myself as a journalist.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see, and something that Gillian can speak to as well, is that there is a layer of journalism that's been corroded, that and disappearing, that we who do other kinds of second order, just as important analysis and filtering and kind of curating like, which is cheaper to do. Now we lack this substrate of on the ground, in depth stuff that sometimes needs someone like me, I'll say, to like surface.
Yeah.
To be like, or I mean, the history stuff that you're doing too, which is much more on the substrate, but like, and the ice stuff you're doing is definitely substrate. But you know what I mean, Mike? Like, are you kind of seeing like there are these layers, and right now what we're getting is a very brittle top layer of just pure public bullshit opinion. Like people, it just takes all the way down, and takes are brittle.
Right.
Takes disappear.
And
if you can't build on top of like if you can't build on top of reporting, then you're just it becomes what we have today.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a struggle that I've had, you know, with my efforts to freelance my ice flight reporting, was that I have been invited to write takes, but I want to do opinionated journalism where I'm saying, look at all these facts. And my, you know, wild controversial opinion is that immigrants should be treated like human beings, right? Like, that's my opinion. So crazy. And, you know, I agree that a lot of the injustices that are happening need a journalist, need someone to go, look at this. This is horrible, right? And if all you're doing is the sort of like think tank opinion, or, you know, this lady said that the ICE agent just shot her, like called her a bitch and shot her. And then you get, and then in the next paragraph, you're just quoting whatever lies Trisha McLaughlin came up with that day. Instead of, you know, like I reach out to ICE for comment on all of my stories, but I'm not going to publish whatever they tell me if they respond. They don't always do. But when they do, if they tell me something that I can't corroborate myself, like this person was a child molester, blah, blah, blah. If I can't confirm that myself, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, I said this and, you know, claimed some unverifiable things, and they have a history of lying. You know, like we don't have to just reproduce what they say, even if I do think that we should ask these people for comment. And let me just say one more thing. I think that the opinion section at the Post was also a victim of this both sidesing, in a way that I also like don't want to tolerate anymore. Where, you know, like when Meghan McArdle was hired, the young people, you know, the junior editors in that section were outraged, were extremely angry. And, you know, our ostensibly liberal senior editor was thrilled with the hire, you know, basically because like, well, we need more conservative voices and she has great views, and you like, as in clicks, not like opinions. She does not have great opinions, but, you know, was just sort of seeing it from like a business perspective. And, you know, a lot of people have talked about, and I completely agree about this, like affirmative action for right-wing columnists, where they're bad writers. They don't support their facts. I literally watched senior editors tell junior editors in the opinion section not to fact check conservative writers because, and I quote, otherwise we wouldn't be able to publish anything by them at all. Wow. And we need them. Wow. And I always just felt like, do we need them?
Need them. Because what you're talking about is this like diversity of opinion bullshit.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the affirmative action for right wingers. Yeah. And Mike, I really value your interest in this, and interest coming from your work, you know, like what you do is so important, right? Like, and I really believe that the creators that we interview who are not journalists, obviously, like we wouldn't do this show if we didn't think that their work is important. But what I hope some people come away with from this show realizing is that our work is symbiotic.
Right.
Like, you cannot create art about racial injustice without the kind of historical work on the Emmett Till murder.
100%.
That she was doing. And I think, I think the joys of the world too, right? I mean, you in order to be an artist or comedian or anyone, you need journalism. Like, you need to know what's happening in the world. I mean, I do feel like artists are kind of journalists as well. A lot of comedians that we have on, a lot of the musicians we have on, I see it there. But we are part of the same media ecosystem, and we can't survive without each other.
100%. I think that at least the sort of stark reality for me is how much journalism is underpinning the sort of foundational reality that we all share. And it's like me, I feel like as an artist, I kind of build on top of that.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like this what world are we living in? So much of that comes down to how much real journalism is in the world. And that's just what's becoming clear through a lot of these conversations.
Yeah. And I as for the diversity of opinion thing, I just feel like the section and, the editorial board, if we had a diversity of opinion, wouldn't there be like a single socialist columnist at a major newspaper in the United States of America? And yet there is not. Like Elizabeth Brunig was the socialist columnist briefly at the Post. It was like the only one they'd ever had. She was there for a year and a half, and she was a socialist with caveats, right? Because
she's pro-life.
Right, because she's pro-life. And they can't just have someone who's just straight up, left wing. Like, why not have a socialist anarchist, right? There's like, why not? Like, if we're doing diversity of opinion,
Where's the diversity?
how about a formerly incarcerated person? How about a person who didn't go to like an East Coast grad school? How about
a disabled person?
Right. How about a formerly unhoused person? How about, or currently an unhoused person? Like, just the like lack of perspective. When I was at the Post, like there'd be, tours around a lot of just like journalism students. Here's a tour of the Washington Post. And like one of the editors who would do these tours, God bless her, she's a lovely person, but she'd always stop at my desk. This was when I was a staff writer, not when I was in opinions. She'd always stop at my desk and she'd go, Gillian is one of our non-traditional hires, and we're so proud that, we can have people from all different backgrounds at the Post. And what she meant was I was a flight attendant. I had a working class job before I went to a fancy grad school and became a journalist. Yeah. And because I hadn't been editor-in-chief of my high school paper and dreamed of being a journalist from, the moment I had ever heard of Lois Lane or whatever, like, because I came to it later, that was gnugh to set me apart as non-traditional. And like, I'm a middle-class white lady, like cis het, like what are you talking about? Non-traditional.
This is a podcast about how creative people are navigating this horrible moment in our economy. So one of the most important things that we do is turn the show over to our guests to let people know how they can best support them. So Gillian, this is the time. And you stated part of it in our bonus question that people can go back and hear. Yeah. As much as that you want to restate now, let people know how they can best support you. This is the time for you to present your plugs.
Yeah. So the best way to support me right now is to become a subscriber on my newsletter. It's GillianBrockell.com. And there's also a one-time tip thing there. What's been interesting is that I'm actually making more money right now on the one-time tips than on the monthly subscribers. And like, that's fine. Any way I can pay my bills is great. And, if you work at a media institution that is not owned by a billionaire and that, is left wing and you have a job available, call me.
All right.
Or,
and then, after you hire her,
yeah,
I'd like
I
to
mean,
get
I need
next
to
in
hit you
line.
up even. I don't even know how to get like a contributor, part-time thing. Like I just got so frustrated with pitching all these different places for like one-offs that like even if I could get a regular freelancing, that'd be great. But so far that has not happened. And like I said, like, we didn't get into it much, but like what I'm reporting with the ICE flights is like wild and horrible. And it doesn't seem like any other journalist in America is covering it full time. And I think because of my previous experience in, the airline industry, I have, a knowledge base that is really helpful for this stuff. I'd like to go back to reporting on history someday, but I've just had to table that because I think this stuff is so important to be talking about right now.
And I hope that we can have you back soon because we really do want to get into all that stuff. I think it's very important work, and it does seem like in a very near future we'll be looking back as this historical moment that you're covering in a unique way. But thank you for talking to us, and I hope we get to speak again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
It's been really good to talk to you. I appreciate your candor so much. And we will definitely have to do another deep dive on the state of American journalism.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even get into my, forays into trying to freelance. And then I didn't even tell you guys about the way that I got into the ICE flight stuff was I did an activist thing. I figured out where this plane was that the judge was looking for, like when it was still in the sky, when they were sending people to South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
I ID'd the plane. And I wasn't even reporting on this then. That was just like a thing that I did because I'm an airplane nerd. And months later, once I was, so what I did is when it landed for fuel in Ireland to refuel, I called the Irish airport police and was like, hey, you guys, I think some of your human trafficking laws might be being violated on this plane that's on this side of the airport right now. You may want to check the plane. Those people are shackled. A judge said they weren't allowed to be taken out, And I've never done anything like that before. I've never tried to like interfere with a story. But I also like wasn't reporting on it. And then months later, once I was like, wow, this is actually hugely interesting and I should be reporting on this. And I was reporting on it. I pitched these stories to a place that is wonderful that I'm not going to name. And they were like, yes, we want these stories. You're amazing. We love what you're doing. And then I said, by the way, just so you guys know, I did this thing a couple months ago where I interfered in this one specific thing. I haven't interfered with anything else. And and they were like, oh, no, we can't work with you.
Wow.
And so I've just been sort of like, I was like embarrassed and like kept it a secret for a while that I did this thing, hoping that other people, I was like full transparency. I'm being responsible by telling you about this. And then after that, in my freelancing, I just didn't tell people because the reporting is sound. And then, and I didn't know if like my struggles with freelancing were because I was, being like low key blacklisted. I think that was just paranoia, or if it's just that like freelancing is really hard anyway, and it's especially hard right now. And then in January, after the invasion of Venezuela, and it came out, Axios reported that both the New York Times and the Washington Post knew about the invasion before it happened, and they chose not to report it because they didn't want to put American service members' lives at risk. I was like, that's interference. You interfered. You didn't report the truth because you're prioritizing the lives of American service members over children who lived on the base that was invaded and shot at, the people there who were killed. And I just got so mad. And I just, just thinking like, there are actually plenty of ways that journalists interfere. They just don't tell readers, right? People will promise a source a story if they'll give them comment on a different story, and I people won't reveal what their politics are when they're reporting a story. People won't reveal that, oh, I'm doing this story on landlords and I'm also a landlord, right? And so I feel like maybe I am going to be painted as having a sort of like scarlet letter as like an activist journalist, but I don't care. And I don't know if I can make money at it, but it's so important. Like this whole like non-interference thing is just not up to the times that we live in. It just isn't. I couldn't report the story that this plane was in Ireland and have someone else do it. There wasn't enough time. I know. I'm just like throwing that out at the end. So
we obviously have so much more to talk about. So, but we're going to have to.
I mean, if you want to do that as a whole nother episode, like I have a ton more to say about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.